Hi guys, welcome back to our channel, and today we're going to be talking about a mob switch for 1.15. There are a number of other videos mob switches out there for 1.15. This is the most practical approach I've found. It's really not that hard to make it and to collect the mobs you need for it, but there are some fairly impractical solutions out there. So let's get into this and see if we can talk you through how to do it and get you building it in your survival world. So this mob switch is a follow-up from our 1.14 mob switch, which we made a video about a few months ago. It turns out that the 1.14 mob switch doesn't work in 1.15, but I'll put a link to that video in the description, and I'll try and remember to stick a card in the video at this point, because that video contains a lot of useful technical information about mob switches and why and how they work. We'll try and cover most of what we need to know here, but it might still be worth having a watch of the other video as well. And before I forget, there's a world download for this world, and like Matica schematics for this mob switch build, and the alternate build, the alternate version behind me. We'll talk about differences between the two, and in fact there are going to be an infinite number of ways you can build this mob switch. I quite like this version because behind me you can see the shulkers that we're going to use in the green tower. In this mob switch behind me, we've only got 4 of them because we're just testing it out. In the one all the way behind me there, we've got all 70, which we're going to need for a fully functional mob switch. So what is a mob switch and why do we want one? I mean, you probably know because you're watching this video and you searched for it, so I'm sure you know what a mob switch is, but briefly, it's a way to stop hostile mobs spawning in your world, and importantly, we need to be able to switch it on and off whenever we want. The reason that our 1.14 mob switch stopped working is because Mojang changed some of the despawning rules in 1.15 going forward. So previously, all mobs would would not despawn if they were in loaded chunks, as long as the player did not move more than 128 blocks away from the mobs. So this meant that you could keep a bunch of mobs in a loaded chunk and then exit the area through the nether, so go through a nether portal and then come out somewhere else in the overworld through a different nether portal, and the game never realised that you moved 128 blocks away from them, so the mobs wouldn't despawn. And Mojang changed that, so now whenever you're in the overworld, Minecraft, the game engine, will check how far away you are from the mobs, and if you're 128 blocks away, they'll despawn. So it no longer requires you to actually travel away from them. The game will now know that you are 128 blocks away. I hope that made sense. But basically it means that we can't keep our mobs loaded in an area and then exit the area through a nether portal and come back into the overworld somewhere else. Because as soon as we come back into the overworld somewhere else, the game knows we've gotten 128 blocks away. The only exception to this are shulkers and withers. Shulkers and withers will stay spawned and count towards the mob cap as long as they're in a loaded chunk, no matter how far away the player is. Ilmango has an excellent video on the current state of mob switches and discusses all the despawning rules and how they apply to various mobs. I'll put a link to that description. Basically, the only mobs we can use are withers and shulkers because they're the only ones that don't despawn when you're far away from them. So you'll realise that withers are going to be a pain in the ass to use, because first you have to collect 3 wither skulls to make a wither boss, and you need 70 wither bosses, and you need to keep them all loaded and keep them somewhere safe where they're not going to destroy everything. So Nimbon does have an excellent video about, I think it's Nimbon, might be Razeworks, about using withers for mob switches, and I'll try and find that and put a link in the description as well. But we're going to use shulkers because they're much easier to gather, and in fact it might sound difficult collecting 70 of them, but it really isn't. You can get that in 3 or 4 medium-sized entities, and we'll talk a bit about shulker hunting tips at the end of the video. So hold on for that, and I promise it'll be a bit easier than you think it is. We're going to cover how to get the shulkers here. We're going to cover that after we talk about how the mob switch works and where we need to build it. Where we build it's probably the most important thing, as we need to be able to move the shulkers in and out of loaded chunks. So where can we build this? Basically, there are two places. The first is here at the edge of our world spawn chunks. And the world spawn chunks are a 21 by 21 area centered around the world spawn point. The world spawn point is basically the center of your Minecraft world. You first spawn in the world at or near your world spawn point. The world spawn point is at or near coordinate 0, 0 in the overworld. Your spawn point can be found in a couple of ways. You can use a compass, like I've got in my hand, and you'll see I've already marked out our spawn point in this world. We'll talk about what's down there around the spawn point shortly. Compass will always point at the world spawn point. In fact, the compass will always point at your respawn point, which is usually the last bed you slept in. But if you break the last bed you slept in, it will point at the world spawn point. And if you die, you'll appear at that world spawn point. So around this point, centered on this point, a 21 by 21 chunk area is called the world spawn chunks. Basically, these are a part of the game a part of the world that the game keeps loaded at all times. So if we turn on our F3G view, we can see the chunk boundaries here. We're in a chunk here, and this is the chunk that the world spawn point is in. So for 10 chunks in each direction around this, that's the world spawn points. And there's something special about the last two of those chunks in each direction. They're called lazy chunks. And what's special about, so for everything in this bit, not in the last two, the world stays fully loaded, redstone ticks, iron farms work, everything keeps working. And in the last two chunks, some funny stuff starts happening. So I think redstone still ticks. Entities still count towards the mob cap if this bit's loaded, but the entities are not fully processed, so the game will not try and calculate where they're moving or any of that stuff, as long as the player is not close to them. If there's an entity here, then the game won't waste resources trying to tick them and calculate what they're going to do. So you'll see up above, I've actually mapped out these spawn chunks in glass, just to give you an idea of how big it is. This bit is the lazy chunk area, and this bit is the normal, fully processed chunk area. So the important thing about the lazy chunks for us and mob switches is that if we keep our shulkers in the lazy chunk, then the shulkers will remain loaded and will still count towards the mob cap no matter where in the overworld we are. So you can see here that this green tower, where the shulkers will be when the switch is on, is inside the lazy chunk area, and the red tower is outside. So the critical thing about a mob switch is that switch moves the shulkers between a loaded area and an unloaded area. There are therefore lots of ways to build this mob switch. You can do all sorts of designs, as long as the switch moves the shulkers from inside here to outside here, and then back in when you want to turn it back on. So let's see this in action. So let's start with the shulkers in the unloaded section, so outside the lazy chunks. So turn on the machine, piston, sends the shulkers up the water elevator, and then they're going to fall down into the unloaded side, or the side outside lazy chunks. So at the minute, obviously these chunks are all loaded because I'm close by, because the player's close. So I'm going to use a mod called Carpet Mod by Nembon, which shows me how many hostile mobs are in the world and the mob cap. So let's turn on our chunk boundaries again. At the minute we've got four hostile mobs, which are those shulkers. So that's 4 hostile mobs loaded, 4 hostile mobs sitting in loaded chunks. And we're going to move away, and because they're outside the lazy chunks, we would expect them to become unloaded by the game and stop contributing to the mob cap. So up the top of the screen, you can see my name, Rolly Pullybird, and then 4/70. So that's 4 hostile mobs out of the 70 in the mob cap. So as we get further away, and there we go. So as bits of the world unload, as we move further away from them, the shulkers eventually unloaded and stopped contributing to the mob cap. And as we get closer again, they load because we're moving back into loading range. Because obviously parts of the world around the player always need to stay loaded. So, oh look, I forgot to turn off the piston. Let's turn that off. The other version of the machine automatically turns it off at the right time. So let's move the shulkers back into the loaded chunks, into lazy chunks. So again, we are going to wait for them to move into the lazy chunks. 3 and 4. So that's all 4. I'm going to turn off my machine. And in fact, you could leave both of these on and you would have a nice feature of shulkers continually going round and round. Anyway, so as we move away this time, we would expect those shulkers to stay fully loaded because they're now in the lazy chunks. So we're now well past where we were last time when they disappeared. And we've still got 4 hostile mobs contributing to the 70 mob cap. So there you go, there's our mob switch working. So let's leave those shulkers outside the lazy chunks for now, before we go and look at our other mob switch, and more importantly before we go and talk about the other place we can build mob switches. So the reason why you might not want to build your mob switch in your lazy chunks, and why you might want to build them somewhere else, in fact in my survival world I built my mob switch in the second option, is that the shulkers will also stay loaded if there's any player nearby. And you know, a lot of people tend to build near their world spawn because that's where they first appeared, and so there's often bases or farms and players are always milling about. So if there's any players nearby, those shulkers will be in loaded chunks and will then contribute to the world mob cap. So often you won't have the option of turning the mob switch off because it'll automatically be on whenever there's players nearby, keeping those chunks loaded. So we're going to move out to our second location, which should loom up out of the rendering distance any second. So here we go. This second location could actually be anywhere. The important thing in this instance is that it's not nearby land, so we're unlikely to have players keeping it loaded accidentally, and it is near a chunk loader. So this is an automatic chunk loader which will keep a number of chunks surrounding it loaded, and that includes these green towers on our mob switch. I've made another video about how these chunk loaders work and how to build them. I'll link that in the description, and I will try and put a card in the video right about now. Very briefly, they work as follows. So pretend the chunk loader is in this dark blue square. chunk loader is switched on, it's loading the chunks. It keeps the 3x3 area around it fully loaded, keeps the 5x5 area around it redstone ticking loaded, so any redstone stuff in this 5x5 area will keep working. It keeps the purple area entity loaded, so any entities in the 7x7 will stay loaded and count towards the mob cap. But again, it's like the lazy chunks, the game won't waste any resources trying to calculate what the entity is going to do or where it's going to move or any of that stuff, but it will keep them loaded. And again, because our shulkers don't despawn if they're loaded chunks, no matter where the player is, if we keep shulkers in these purple chunks, then they will count towards the mob cap. And that gives us control over whether we turn this switch on or off. And in fact, I didn't actually need to build a big switch like this. Yes, this does move the shulkers in and out of the purple area, purple chunks, the 7x7 around this chunk loader. But actually, all we need to do is turn the chunk loader off and let these chunks unload, and the mobs will stop counting towards the mob cap. And then we can come back, turn on the chunk loader, and they'll start counting again. But I kind of like having the flexibility of being able to turn it off using this switch itself, or turn it off using the chunk loader. Because in my survival world nearby the chunk loader, I've also got an iron farm, and that way I can keep the chunks loaded and the iron farm working, but also turn off the mob switch as and when I want to. So again, in terms of the chunks, the chunk loader keeps loaded, so this is the chunk it's in. This is the next fully loaded chunk. This is the redstone ticking chunk. And this is the one that keeps entities loaded but unprocessed. And in the video, in the description where I built this, if you go into that video, you'll also see like schematics for this build as well. And having a chunk loader is valuable for all sorts of stuff, especially farms and things, where you can keep them running even if you're nowhere near them, and they don't stop running because you've moved away from the area. And this is confirmed as of the time of this video to be working in 1.15 and 1.16 up to the latest snapshots, and these mob switches also work up to the latest 1.16 snapshots. So let's make sure this chunk loader is running and we can demonstrate this mob switch. The way this chunk loader actually works is it sends a minecart through to the nether, and there's a similar station on the other side which sends the minecart back. And if an entity goes through a portal, Minecraft loads the other side of the portal, it keeps it loaded for 15 seconds. So as long as that minecart goes back and forth at least every 15 seconds, then the game will keep these chunks fully loaded and the nether chunks loaded. So anyway, this is working now. We can use carpet mod again to view our mob cap. So you can see that it's at 70 out of 70, because there's 70 shulkers here. Let's move the shulkers into the unloaded side first. This one, we just flip this trapdoor and wait for the pistons to move the shulkers over. Kind of fun watching this actually. And on this build, we've got a nice water elevator in the middle, just in case you need to go up to the top for any particular reason, or if we just want to go up for the view. And then we can drop down here into the little puddle. Okay. So during that sped up bit, you'll have seen me manually switching on the piston, well, adjusting the upper clock duration a little bit, still tweaking the duration to make sure that all the shulkers get pumped over to the correct side, and then turning on the piston manually just to get the last few shulkers. So now that they're over in the unloaded side, or the side which will become unloaded, let's fly away and double check. So we've currently got 70 out of 70 in our Bobcat. Let's turn on F3G. So 70 out of 70, so any second now, that's, yep, there it goes. So we're far enough away from this where it's unloaded because the player's gotten far away. So let's move our shulkers back to the green side. So during that, because this chunk loader was working, all this area was still loaded, but these guys were just outside the loaded area. While that's going, you might be wondering about what this is. This is Rayworks Automatic AFK Infinite Railway Builder. So it uses railway duping to build an infinite railway. Uses some lava and water to make the cobblestone generator that places the duped railway on top of it. So I'll put a link to this in the video description as well. This, again, we'll use this once we go to the end to talk about how to get the shulkers from the outer end islands to the main end island, and this thing is brilliant. You can just set it going and make a railway line as long as you want. So now that the shulkers are over on the green side, let's fly away and make sure that they stay loaded in the world. So it's 70 out of 70 at the minute. They disappeared around now, last time we did this. And there we go, still there. Last time they were gone before we got to that island. So our mob switch is working. So let's pop on over to the end and talk about the mechanics of getting shulkers to the overworld, because it's not quite as simple as just pushing them through the exit gateway portal. So here we are in the end, and I know my end portal over there looks a bit weird, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I just wanted to point out that another way of determining where your world spawn point is to throw a few things through the end portal. So there's some milk and a slime block. We follow it through. We'll see that right here on this redstone block is where they've landed. So this redstone block is our spawn point, and the spawn chunks surround this, and you'll see again up there where I've mapped it all out. The reason I've got these gold ones here is because I first tried to find the spawn point using the compass method, and I couldn't narrow it down to one block, so I wasn't sure which of these four, so that's why I marked them all. But by throwing the entities through the end gateway portal, I have narrowed it down to this redstone block. So let's go back to the end. In this creative world, I've just made a little temporary end portal here. So let's head back over here and talk about what happens when we send shulkers through, because they're a bit different than just throwing items through. So let's assume that we have collected our shulkers in minecarts and we've brought them to this main center end island, and we'll talk about tips for collecting shulkers shortly. It's not actually that difficult to do, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So once you get your shulkers here in minecarts, the secret to getting them through the portal is that shulkers only like to stand on certain blocks. So they only like solid blocks. They don't like transparent blocks like glass or leaves or anything. They don't like railway lines. They don't like redstone or switches or buttons or end rods. So basically, we send the shulker along in a minecart. It hits this detector activator rail even, and it gets chucked out of the minecart, and it looks for the nearest block that it can actually sit on, and the nearest block happens to be one of these four blocks below the end rods, below the pistons, on the bedrock pillar at the centre. So shulkers will look for blocks within 8 blocks horizontally or vertically, and an 8 block square, well, I guess 16 block square, it's 8 blocks either side. They'll look for a solid surface that they can teleport to. So let's try that out. Let's throw down a shulker here, a minecart. So the shulker's going to come over, get thrown out of the minecart, and now it's looking for an appropriate block that it can sit on. So it might take a few seconds before it notices one of these bedrock blocks. Often it helps if you're not standing right beside it, because I think it thinks you're going to attack it. So let's give it a sec. When we're doing this in survival, in our actual world, we'll probably send 5 or 6 or 7 over at once, and shulkers will very quickly find these bedrock positions. Maybe throw another one over. So let's get another shulker over here, and look, that one's found the bedrock block. The shulker is going to spend a few seconds looking as well. Sometimes they find it immediately, and sometimes it takes them a minute or so. So anyway, once they find this bedrock block, oh, there's the other one gone. We can push a button to activate those pistons and push it through. Let's push that button. And now let's go see what happens on the overworld side. So we've just come through on the overworld side, and our shulkers are nowhere to be seen. So remember, when we threw items through, they sat on this redstone block waiting for us. Shulkers obviously behave a bit differently. So when they come through, they do actually end up here at this redstone block for about 1 game tick. They spend 1 game tick looking for a block that they can sit on, and around here you'll see there are no solid blocks for them to sit on. We've covered the 8x8 area around this spawn point with half slabs. So these are brick half slabs. Redstone, doesn't matter if it's activated or not activated, or buttons, or water. You don't like sitting on water. Also note that this does also include under the ground, so this little cave was within 8 blocks of that redstone block, so we had to cover it in buttons to stop the shulker teleporting here. So why does the shulker disappear? Actually, it's a bug in the game, but we're going to use it to our advantage. So it's a bit complicated, and Nembon explains it in one of his videos. The shulker, actually, the Minecraft entity actually contains a set of coordinate data which records the block that the shulker was last attached to. And when it comes through the portal, it's now at our world spawn point. Can't find the block to attach to here, so it has a look at the previous coordinates of the block it was attached to, and the end stone pillar is at coordinate 0640, I think, in the end. It's 00 anyway, not sure about the vertical height. So the shulker decides, okay, in the overworld, let's go back to 00 and see if there's any suitable blocks there for us to attach to. And that's what it does. So after 1 game tick looking for a block at the world spawn to attach to, if it can't find any, it jumps to 00. So let's turn on our coordinates. Using this mod is called voxel map, I think. So let's display coordinates at the top big. So we are at 00 right here. So we are currently at Y level 76. So if we go down to Y level 64, we'll see our shulker. After looking around at the world spawn for somewhere to sit, can't find anywhere, jumps to 0640 and looks for somewhere to sit. And actually, it can't find anywhere here either. All of these blocks in this little cave are covered in buttons, so there's no suitable block for it to connect, for it to jump to, and everything within 8 blocks of that are also covered in buttons, or leaves, or transparent blocks, anything, ladders. So the shulker has nowhere comfortable to attach to, except for this one space here, which we've intentionally left available for the shulker to jump to. So this is the only space so the shulkers come through the portal, can't stay at the world spawn, there's no available blocks, so they come and they're all going to sit down in that cave, because there's no other blocks for them to jump to except this, so you can have as many as you want in that cave, and only one of them will then teleport to this block. So we can send a minecart along to pick up the shulker, and then the next one should jump out once it notices that block's free. And we can use this to collect all our shulkers in order. So we send them all through the end gateway portal, get 70 or so in here, then they jump out one at a time, we pick them up in minecarts, take them over to our mob switch, either here or the one further away, and we can easily build a railway to any part of the world we want using Raceworks Infinite AFK Railway Builder. And that is basically everything you need to know about building a shulker mob switch. Just remember that once the shulker jumps here, it's going to keep looking for somewhere else to jump to. So make sure the 8 by 8 area around this is also 8 blocks in each direction is also not suitable for the shulker to jump onwards from or to. Okay, let's go back to the overworld let's go back to the end and have a quick chat about the easiest way to collect shulkers and why it's not actually that hard to do. Let's talk about how to gather the shulkers we need for our mob switch. We need 70 per player in our world. So in a single player world, you only need 70. And in fact, to collect them, it's not that bad. In a large end city like this, we can almost get all 70 in one city. So to see how many shulkers are in the area around the player, you can type /say @e for entity, and then entity type equals Minecraft shulker. And what this will do is it will make each shulker say something. So there we go. Each of these words shulker has been said by a shulker in this end city. So if we count these, we've got 88 shulkers. So in this one end city, we can collect more than enough shulkers for our mob switch. So if you need a whole lot of shulkers, then you can use a tool like Amidst, and there's a link in the video description. Amidst lets you put in your world seed, and it'll help you map out where the different things in your world are, so you can use it to go and find end cities. So in that instance, you would use Amidst to find your end cities, find somewhere that has a few end cities close together, and then fly around it first with your elytra to make sure they're there and they're fairly big, and then build an AFK railway out to those end cities for an easy way to transport your shulkers back to the main island. And again, the link for this AFK railway builder by Raceworks is in the description, and it's a lifesaver when you're doing this in survival and you need to transport things a long distance, because you can just leave this going and you'll have a railway all the way there. But since we've seen that a big city like this can have more than enough shulkers for our mob switch for one person, then hopefully you won't need to do too much shulker hunting. So once we've got to the end city, how do we make gathering shulkers easier? So the things in my hotbar I would advise you to at least get hold of and keep handy. So first off, you're going to want food, because while we're going to do our best not to anger the shulkers. They will hit us, and we're going to need to eat to keep our strength up. You're going to want rails and minecarts to collect the shulkers, and you're going to want a slime block. You're going to want lots of slime blocks, and or potentially lots of dirt. Slime blocks and dirt are the easiest things to use when building temporary railways. You're also going to want some redstone torches and some levers to power your powered rails. Some ender pearls will come in handy, so if the shulkers do hit you with their levitation, you can always throw an ender pearl to get somewhere safe quickly, in case you're up high over the void or just over somewhere that's going to kill you with the drop. And perhaps the most important thing is our invisibility potion. I'd suggest making them all the 8-minute versions, and the interesting thing with invisibility potion is that it will stop the shulker's ability to detect you by 90%. So if you take off all your armor, the shulkers won't be able to see you till you're 90% closer than you otherwise would have been, which lets us get to around here before the shulker sees us. And from here you can place your rails and your minecart, so half the time you can get the shulker in the minecart before he's even seen you. Now you gotta be careful with invisibility. It only works on the horizontal plane, so if you're in this big central tower, even if you're invisible, the shulkers above you and below you will still be able to see you. So just be careful with that one and try and collect the shulkers as you go up, and that way you won't have any below you to worry about. So let's say we're in here, we want to collect this shulker up here. Remember that shulkers can be picked up by any minecart travelling beside them. So all we need to do is throw down some slime blocks, a couple of powered rails, throw a minecart here, and power the slime block, or power the rail, and there it goes. So yeah, just work your way up. You can work your way up the central tower pretty easily, just using slime blocks around the outside, almost like a spiral staircase. So I suggest you send your shulkers back to the main island in batches of 8 or so, 8 to 10. You're probably going to want to travel with them as they go back, so that they don't disappear in unloaded chunks. I'm not sure exactly if they would disappear or if they would just sit there and wait for you to go into that chunk again, because remember, shulkers don't despawn, so I'm actually not certain what would happen if they got far ahead of you into unloaded chunks. I suspect they would stay there until you got to that chunk again. But anyway, I would send them back to the main island in batches, and then put them through the gateway portal in batches as well, so that you just have a bit more control over them. I've built this sort of rail system beside the end city. I'd suggest you build something similar. This bit here is just kind of a holding area for the shulkers that I've already grabbed from the city. We've got some rail coming in between these two blocks. This allows the shulkers through, but then they can't roll backwards. This block stops them. And similar on this side, this block stops them moving over here. When we want to start sending them back, we're going to take away this block. We're going to give this some power, and the shulkers are going to come in here. Then we'll swap that, and it will go in there, and we'll bring that lever on, and the shulker will, the next one will go that block, and that lever, it'll go to the next block, and so on. And then once they're in all the way down, we can turn on this lever, and that will push them out one at a time, and they'll start making their way back to the main island. And then we can just drop a minecart and jump in it and follow them. So once I've got a bunch in this bit, all I do is take away this block and stick a lever here and turn it on, and then nudge one of them, or two of them, and turn that lever off, and two of them went in front of their blocks. So we'll flip that lever so that the track points in this direction, flip that lever, so the next one will go to this block, Let's turn that on and try and get this guy moving. Sometimes, if they don't want to move too easily, I just throw down a minecart further back and send it along, and that'll nudge them. And there they go. There's one. That guy's gonna go back and forth until we flip this. And there he goes. And let's fill this up. Just so that we can demo it, let's fill it up. So that guy's gonna go back and forth until this turns on. Then I keep forgetting to do the switch. So this guy's gonna go back and forth until that goes on. Let's do that lever and get the last one. Oh, I accidentally left a torch there from earlier. So there we go, that's them all in. And now when they come out, because these levers are on, they're all going to head off in that direction. And we've got a minecart here for ourselves, so let's send them all off. Oh no, this guy's gone the wrong way, but he'll come back. Then we can get in. Alright, so now we're back on the main island, and we've brought our first set of shulkers back. And we built another sort of shulker collection station here. And we would just do the same thing, move the shulkers in here, then maybe we want to move them one at a time over to the end gateway portal. And you could do that easily by just powering a piston at a time instead of powering them all. And I did find out what happens when you send the shulkers off into unloaded chunks. Accidentally on my way over, I sent these guys off far ahead of me, and nothing really happens. They don't despawn or anything. They just sort of wait there until you arrive. So don't worry if you send them off far ahead of you down this railway track and you don't follow closely behind. They'll still be waiting for you. So that's it. That's everything you need to know about mob switches in 1.15 and onwards. So I realised we didn't really talk about how this all works. Basically, we've got a tower of shulkers. This piston pushes them into this soul sand bubble elevator. Whenever you want to move them over to the unloaded side, the piston gets powered by this observer, which gets moved by this piston triggered by this clock. The clock is powered by this redstone block, and then there's a bit of funny stuff going on here. The whole thing is powered by this etho hopper clock, which provides the timing so that this piston goes just over 70 times for the 70 minecarts. Whenever we turn the whole thing on by flipping this trapdoor, the observer sends a pulse to this T flip-flop, which pulses the redstone block to stay over here and turn on the piston. It also turns off this. The redstone block also turns off this torch, which lets the etho hopper clock start. And then when the etho hopper clock finishes timing, triggers the T flip-flop again, which pulls back the redstone block, which in turn will turn on that torch down there and stop the hopper clock. So by doing this trapdoor and moving the redstone block, we start the etho hopper clock, and then once it's done, it'll trigger this T flip-flop, and that'll move the redstone block away from here, which will turn on that torch again and stops the hopper clock. Again, Lightmatic Schematica is down in the description. Lightmatica schematic is down in the description. Go and the world download. Go download them, play around with them, and you'll see how it works. But there are hundreds of ways you could build your mob switch. All you need is something that pushes shulkers from one chunk to another. You could do 70 pistons, or all sorts of other ways. Anyway, now you guys know everything you need to know about mob switches in 1.15 and forward. As I said earlier, this has been tested right up to the most recent 1.16 snapshot, and that junk loader up there behind me also works up to the 1.16. So yeah, grab the downloads, play away, click like and subscribe and all that other YouTube jazz. It'd be nice to get up a bit in the rankings. We're a fairly new channel. We only started a couple of months ago because my son wanted to record a video and he got me into it in the Minecraft about a year ago, and now I'm all about the technical stuff. So I'm still learning some of these things, but I like to pass on some of the stuff I do learn. So hopefully you'll like this. We've got a whole storage series and item sorting series coming up. So hit subscribe and you'll get notified of that, and we'll hopefully see you soon. Bye bye.